they get money, I don't think it's going to go to the roads.
Well, that's another problem. You know, I think some very substantial fraction of it goes off to build toy trains and all kinds of other stupid things. And, you know, it's about anything, it's almost about anything except for more lanes, you know.
More lanes, you
yeah,
say?
Yeah, anything except, you know, we'll do anything but put more lanes. I remember I decided that transportation policy in Oregon and nationally was sort of crazy when I used to commute up and down I-5. And then one day, they sort of moved all the lanes a few hundred right, and it was like that for 6 months, a year, and then they moved them to the left. But no one ever added a lane. No one ever did anything useful at all. There was nothing wrong with the highway to begin with. It was just, oh, God, we got to spend money. We got to spend money.
Just shuffling chairs, Annie.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not really sure exactly.
The problems we have are not money problems. The problems we have are structural problems. We have like a kind of cancer that's caused by more and more people doing things other than what the people want. You know, and it's like, there's a graph of the teachers, and the number of teachers slowly rises, but the number of administrators rises like this. You know, and you know, when I went to school, it was simple. You had a principal, maybe an assistant principal, and a bunch of teachers. You know, and now it's the specialist and that specialist and this media person. And the more of these specialists and experts they add, the worse the test scores get. The children get dumber and dumber, the more they're carrying around this giant superstructure of people who are doing something other than teaching. Because teachers are like, well, now they have to interact with the administrators. They have to fill out reports, you know, and and testing. And gradually the children are sort of shunted off into some dark little corner while all these educational professionals talk to each other. It's crazy to be true. Emmett Week says that they now in the high schools have 8 periods each day, okay? And the rule is that a student can't take more than 7 of those periods in 2 days. So the high schools are always half empty. All the kids are bare about hay. And you look at this and it's like, something is really screwed up here, but you know, just little hints of it appear here and there. And there's this great rotten elephant in the room, which is this totally non-functional institution, and the only answer is support or give us all more money and everything will be fine. You know, that's the message for 20 or 30 years. People in Portland have got to wake up. That message is not true.
Mm-hmm. For the children.
It's for the children. Yeah.
So the message that you're taking is to run for Blumenauer. Now, you running against him, or are you talking about running in the primary?
I'm running as a Republican, so I'm running against him.
Right. So you've already been. Your party's already chose you. As
no.
The
The primary's in May 20th,
right.
and then the election's in the fall. So we had the election here. You guys are getting the early story.
That's kind of what I was wondering.
You're probably going to be running against Blumenauer in November. That's probably what
I hope so.
Is there anybody else running that's want to
Not that I know of, but the Democrats have been known to stick Republican primary to knock them out because this is such a Democrat city. Sometimes they can get away with that stuff.
I think that's a pretty universal. That's pretty much of a universal tactic, I think.
Yeah.
So that's all these years.
The main issue is that there's a school of thought, okay, for which the answer to every problem is more government, and worse, the answer to every problem is more federal government. And so I kind of think people can have honest differences of opinion about how do we run the schools, how do we run healthcare. But when it comes to the question of whether the federal government should be in charge of all of these new subjects that they didn't touch for 150 years, you know, I think the federal government is the jack of all trades and the master of none. And the whole genius of American government was we had a constitution with a limited bunch of stuff the federal government did, and then the rest was in the states. And by having the federal government be in charge of at all completely, it brings everything to a giant, total, dysfunctional, grinding halt, where they sit around and they cobble together these 1,000-page things like Obamacare, and then lo and behold, guess what? It doesn't work. It doesn't work in this state, it doesn't work. It never was supposed to be a national issue. It, frankly, was blatantly unconstitutional in the case of Obamacare. You know, there isn't any authority in the Constitution that says you must buy this product the government wants you to buy. That's just invented.
Got past the 5-4 vote at the Supreme Court.
Well, then we learned that the NSA was spying on them all and monitoring everything they did. You know, so maybe that's how it got passed. Who knows?
Yeah, well, Roberts is the one that's.
I think it's none of the federal government's business whether people grow hemp in Oregon. They do have interstate commerce power to stop you from shipping it across borders, but I don't know why we should be regulating that. You know, part with the Blumenauer school of thinking, and it's not the case with his position on marijuana, but with many other things, is that people are essentially like cows. and the government's like the farmer, okay? And so, you know, the government, and that's not my vision of people at all. My vision of people, I care about citizens' rights, not state rights or federal government rights.
Consumer rights.
Or about citizens' rights. And I don't want people to be cows. And I don't think the government has any business telling people what they can eat or smoke or anything like that at all.
How about, well, take that a little bit step further. Do you think the federal government needs to make sure that the food we eat is, or the drugs that we take, you know, the FDA, is that a valid in your mind?
There is authority over interstate commerce, and so the federal government has the power to regulate interstate commerce. But one thing I'd like to think about is we have all this new technology now, you know, and we have feedback mechanisms in the form of law and things like that that control mistakes. You know, if somebody puts out something with salmonella in it, you know, bang, they will get sued very fast and very hard. And the question I have is all these layers and layers of regulation, are they causing more trouble than they're saving? You know, one of the problems we have now is people are getting these horrible things in the hospitals, you know, these multi-resistant antibiotics.
MRSA.
Right.
Yeah.
And part of the reason this is because the FDA has stepped in, and essentially we now have this process where to develop any new drug costs billions of dollars. It becomes this political thing with contributions and forged test results and all this stuff. And yet, you know, and so it's hard to measure what we didn't get. You know, how many drugs that would have saved hundreds of lives do we not have now? And all these people who die from these infection things, would they not have died? And you can look at it and say, okay, well, we haven't, you know, issued that many drugs that do these horrible things, but we have, in essence. You know, lots come through, and then after a couple of years, it's like, oops, you know, like that heart attack thing a few years ago.
Flutamide way back.
Right, and so, you know, there's a feedback mechanism already. When somebody does this and it doesn't work, bang, you know, that can kill a company. People are naturally careful. And so the question is, have we gone too far so that we're now chilling the development of everything? And that, I think, you can easily make the case for.
Because of what you're saying, you know, if within a couple of years, if people start dying, that something will be done. But meanwhile, people are dying. So
and they did anyway. The Vioxx, you know, all these things got through, and we don't really have an experiment. You know, what if there were a tenth as many regulators, and what if the processes were streamlined, you know, quite a bit? Would it create these extra deaths? I don't know. I don't think so. And I think if the costs of getting a new drug were approved were much, much less, we would save a lot more lives than we would risk. And nobody is thinking, but nobody in the world seems to be thinking in terms of pruning back the government. It's like, you know, it's like an apple tree. You know, if you got the apple tree out there in the past years, you got this thing with hundreds and hundreds of these tiny little branches, no fruit at all. Okay?
Or they're this big.
Yeah, or they're that big, right? Okay, you know, there's so many areas where regulation, some level of regulation makes sense, and we're so far beyond any level that makes sense. Somehow the answer is, oh, let's just layer another layer on top of it. You know, then we can have 3 or 4 or 5 agencies all doing the same thing, and it's not working. Everything is grinding to a halt. That's why there's no jobs. What do you have? You have these 2 kids in Boston. You know, Russia calls up some other country. I don't know who it was. Watch out for these guys. You know, they're Chechens. You know, and what do we have? We have the Boston police in Boston. You know what they were doing? They were having an exercise to worry about possible terrorist attacks from a right-wing organization, the American Patriots. So they're out there doing all this crazy stuff, while, you know, the real threats come in and just fall on the floor because no one's paying attention, because you've got 50 different agencies all doing the same thing. It's incredible.
Now, there wasn't a exercise?
What about, could states conceivably handle this whole thing better?
Of course. You know, I mean, the beauty of the American system is you could have one state try Obamacare. Actually, that happened. It was called, it failed. You could have another state try the Cuban model. You know, let's just build more hospitals and doctors. You know, one of the amazing things about healthcare, I was down in Mexico. I opened up the newspaper, a big article about healthcare. You read it. The whole tenor of the article is, how many more doctors and nurses are we going to get? And here, the whole tenor of the thing is, how many layers of cost sharing, approval, cost subsidy, insurance, are we going to get? You know, the bottom line is, do we have more doctors and hospitals? Not, you know, do we 5,000-page piece of crap that has 4,000 rules for subsidizing this with this and this with this and this. And in the real world, a government that isn't, terminally constipated with bureaucracy will focus on delivering a service. And that's what happened. We used to have a government that delivered services. We used to have a government that built the Bonneville Dam, that built the interstate highways. Now it's move it over 3 feet, move it back 3 feet, blow up the dam, whatever. We've lost, we don't get anything out of them anymore. It's incredible.
Which brings up the point. You're going to have a regular campaign, and you're going to be taking contributions, and you're going to be seriously going after Blumenauer. Right?
Anybody can go to my website and contribute money. www.buchal.com. Buchal.
Did we get that?
I wanted that on here anyway. I wanted that.
But we're not going to solve these problems if in a case of conventional campaigns with a bunch of rich people giving money to their little puppet candidates. We're going to change things when people wake up and say, I've had enough. I don't want this anymore. I want to fix. I recognize that this little incrementalism of let's just send the same people back there again and hope that they do a better job this time. No, that we're past that point. And people got to wake up. And my main issue, we haven't talked about it all, which is the emerging police state. And this is a one-way ticket. You go down this thing and there isn't any going back.
It's not only the emergency and police state; it's the emerging militarization of the police.
Oh yeah. 2,700 giant. You go to my website under issues. The first thing you'll see is a picture of one of those armored cars that every little police station seems to have now. I mean, you look at what they did in Watertown. Armed gangs coming in house to house. Fourth Amendment, no constitutional rights. It's do what we say or we'll shoot you. I mean, we're losing the rule of. I'm a lawyer, and it's shocking to me how we're losing the rule of law. What does it mean when it says, I can just this citizen is associated with a terror element, and I can sign this piece of paper and kill him.
NDAA.
Right? Yeah. It's crazy. It's self-respecting people, who would call themselves Americans and have any of the Constitution whatsoever. They shouldn't be doing this kind of crap. And Americans have to wake up and understand, there comes a point where these forces gain more and more power and the technology gets more and more advanced. And then there's a return. You are cows now. You are cow slaves. Everything you do is watched. Every web search you make is recorded. Every email you send is recorded. Every letter that you send through the mail, they take a picture of the envelope. Everywhere you go, all the time, where your cell phone, they'll know where you are. And all of this information is going to sit in some computer in Utah where the government and its friends can have it and no one else can.
There is a direction that this country is being taken in.
Sure.
That's irrespective of either side.
Sure. It's an elites versus common people thing, and there's a whole class of people who essentially think that they were born to be the ones on top of the horse, and everybody else is supposed to be carrying them around on their back, and that's why they're doing this, with this. They are destroying class. They want the Roman model, where you've got all these rich senators, and people can go and have free bread down at the Coliseum, and their free EBT, and their free Obama phones, as long as they just sit still, shut up, and don't rock the boat, and it's destroying this. It's destroying this whole country. And you're right to assign blame to both parties.